Hello, I'm Harold Munro, editor-in-chief at the Vancouver Sun and Province, and joining me is our City Hall columnist, Dan Fumano, off a very busy week, right up until the end of the day Friday, pulling together all kinds of, first of all, the breaking news about the mayor's decision to try to dissolve the park board, and then some of your great coverage about what went on in the room where all this went down with the current ABC majority park board commissioners. So, uh, Dan, it was a busy week. How do you kind of sum it all up?
Well, yeah, as you say, it was a busy week. I mean, when we started the week last week, we didn't have any indication that this was coming. I did not know that the mayor was going to be planning to take this step this month. So it kind of caught us off guard. We spoke with some of the park board commissioners who were elected last year with ABC. They told us they were caught off guard. Now obviously three of those commissioners have left the party and say that they're now sitting as independents. So it obviously completely changes the makeup of the actual park board itself. Now you have three independent commissioners who were elected last year with ABC, but they're sitting as independents. You have one green, and then you have the three who are staying with ABC. And those three who are staying with ABC are supporting the mayor's plan to dissolve the park board. Now, of course, those dynamics on the park board and the way it'll play out in votes, we'll see kind of what happens. Tonight might be the first kind of glimpse of how that new park board composition plays out. There is a regular park board meeting scheduled tonight. Not sure exactly what to expect there, but I think there's going to be a bunch of people in attendance. And it might be, a somewhat heated environment, more so than sort of the usual Monday night in December park board meeting. I think it might be a pretty intense meeting. Of course, it remains to be seen how much longer this elected park board even is an elected body, right? If council does approve the mayor's motion this week, which certainly seems likely because the mayor is introducing it and his party ABC has voted as a block almost everything so far this term. So if he does move forward with it, by his estimation, he thinks it might take the province about 6 months to implement these legislative changes, to change the Vancouver Charter. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but that's kind of the guess he's given. And in their initial statements so far, the province sounded like they were open to implementing this if it is council's will. We got a statement from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs saying that basically it's up to city council and they will move to pursue those charter changes if that's what council wants. So the province has given at least a bit of an indication that they're open to this. I don't know how fast they'll move on it, or obviously a lot could change between now and then.
Right. So in that sense, there's at least a little bit of a gamble on the part of Sim, because now he's gambled away his majority on the park board for at least as long as it exists.
Yes.
If for some reason the province doesn't move ahead with the charter change, then he's staring at a park board it's now out of his control through till the next election.
Yeah, and of course, it remains to be seen how much of a gamble is that, because if the park board doesn't exist by this time next year, then the fact that his party has lost a majority on it, maybe is not as big a deal. If all of those decisions are going to sort of fall under council oversight, and he still controls council, then maybe losing the park board majority isn't a huge gamble for them right now. But I guess there's the broader question of does it could this have other unintended consequences? And I don't know. I mean, I don't have any indication that this, for example, is going to cause a rift within council or within ABC's school board majority.
Right. Yeah, you don't have any sense of that yet, right?
I don't have an indication of that.
Has Sim said anything about? Has he said anything about what he wants to replace the park board with?
I mean, basically, my understanding is they would propose to make it just much more like every other city in BC, where you have parks and recreation operations are just another department of the city under council's oversight, sort of folded within city jurisdiction instead of having this separate elected
Right.
body, which obviously is unique among BC cities. Vancouver is the only one. As we've talked about before, Cultus Lake Park does also have an elected park board.
Right.
But in terms of actual urban, centers with a separate elected body overseeing all of the parks and recreation kind of operations, Vancouver is quite unique in this way.
Yeah. Would you have some kind of an
So
appointed board or advisory body or series of them, or like he hasn't really
I
talked about
asked,
that?
yeah, no, I did
Yeah.
ask him for some more details, and he sort of said it's too early to know. Their idea is that they would set up a transition team to sort of oversee this transition, which would involve, staff from the mayor's office. I think probably the mayor himself, some representatives from city council, representatives from sort of the broader community, like community groups, and probably, the GM of the park board. There is a staff member, a senior staffer who oversees park board operations, and he was only kind of appointed or confirmed in that role relatively recently himself, the GM of parks. So yeah, the way the mayor describes it, it would sort of be there would be a transition team to sort of figure out longer term what it would look like.
Okay, but and yet he's confident, or at least he says that this is going to save millions of dollars. So where are the savings going to come from?
We don't know that just yet. I mean, the savings of the actual, axing the 7 elected commissioner positions
That's
will not
small
save a
amount.
lot of money.
No,
These are part-time jobs. They only make like, I think, 18 or 20
right.
grand a
So we're
year
talking less
each.
than yeah, yeah.
So the savings in terms of the park board, the commissioner salaries would be a very, a tiny fraction of the park board's overall budget. The mayor did mention something vague about saving millions, and last week I did ask his chief of staff if we could get more information. Where does this number come from? What are these calculations based on? We don't know yet, but I've been told that the mayor will be making more information available at the council meeting on Wednesday. So Wednesday is when this motion is going to be considered, and supposedly the mayor is going to make more information available either at that meeting or maybe before then. I am certainly curious to see it. The city's auditor general did a big audit of park board operations that was just released earlier this year, I think just a month or two ago, which did have some recommendations for, efficiencies or ways that different operations could work better, which is not uncommon. The
Yes.
the city's internal audit division and the auditor general do these regular things, looking at different city departments. But yeah, but the auditor general report doesn't talk about saving millions by folding the board. So it's not in there. So I'm not sure where these calculations have come from. If it's something the mayor's done himself, or if it's maybe he's got someone else looking at it. I'm not sure. But I'll look forward to hearing more later this week.
So the mayor, as we know, and you talked about recently, his own task force that is doing a bunch of accountants that are doing their own analysis around city. Was the park board in scope or out of scope for that work?
I can't remember. Sorry. I know that the the police the police budget was not inside the scope of it, and neither was the library and park board. I can't remember specifically.
Yeah. I don't remember them speaking about park board or the mayor talking about it at that meeting. But that
Yeah,
would be it'd be interesting to whether, so I'm trying to get my head around what the mayor's been doing over the last year behind the backs of the park board, because they didn't know what was going on. Who was he talking to come up with this notion that he could save millions of dollars by getting rid of the park board?
yeah, we've asked, and I don't know the answer to that yet. Yeah, and just to confirm, I just checked the notes, and the park board was outside of the scope of the mayor's budget task force. So I think the
Okay.
idea was that you have, these 3 major city departments: the police department, the park board, and the public library. It's about a third of the city's overall budget combined. Those all sort of have their own kind of quasi-independent governance structures because they have boards, right, that oversee them. In the case of the park board, it's an elected board, but in the case of the police board, obviously it's a board of appointed civilians. And the library board as well has, an appointed board of directors that oversees it. So those areas were outside. Now, I mean, the park board has been doing their own work as well, trying to look for additional revenue and try to,
Yes.
right? So they've just in their first year of being elected have kind of overseen this a strategy that's looking to try to increase revenue and look for different revenue opportunities to help fund parks and recreation, whether it's potentially sponsorship opportunities or advertising, and just additional ways to work with the private sector to generate more revenue too.
They also recently unveiled that rather ambitious long-term waterfront makeover around English Bay that was partly necessitated by climate change and rising water, but also just opening up the waterfront to new public uses in
Yeah,
different ways.
yeah.
That's again, that's a big project. But does that just sort of, I guess we don't really know, that would then become the responsibility of council to decide how to proceed or at what pace to proceed if there was no park board.
Yeah, I guess so. And a lot of people are raising concerns about this, saying, there is a good reason that Vancouver has this additional independent, um, body, separate from council, and sometimes there is friction between the two bodies. But some people are trying to make the argument that the public is actually better served that way. It is a way to, it adds an extra layer of independence and to try to ensure that parks are in public spaces and green spaces are not lost or privatized or put to other uses outside of parks and recreation, other uses that could potentially be generating more money. There's a perennial every year or two, the idea of, whoa, should we develop some of the city's golf courses into some other use? The city owns three
Right.
18-hole golf courses as well as 3 pitch and putts. And it just comes up all the time, every year or every other year, where someone says, well, should we maybe build something else? It's a huge amount of land. And there's always these arguments like that,
Okay.
that get tossed around, with the
What are
parkland.
you hearing? I mean, you've heard from a lot of readers since your stories have come out. What are
Yeah,
you hearing from people? I know it's not necessarily a scientific poll,
no,
but
no. It's yeah, and I'm hearing from a lot of readers, and we know we got a lot of letters to the editor and stuff. Um, and it's kind of interesting because this is obviously has kind of come out of nowhere. I mean,
yes,
the mayor, well, back when Ken Sim sort of first announced he wanted to run for mayor again, a year and a half before the election, Sim raised the idea of abolishing the park board, said, this is the only city in BC that has this kind of arrangement. Why Vancouver would be better served if we didn't have this unique arrangement. So Sim did float that idea initially, but then he changed his thinking before the election and publicly said, we've changed our mind. We're not going to seek the abolition of the park board. We're going to run great candidates and just make the park board run better. So that was that's what his park board commissioners campaigned on. That's what the voters kind of expected. So this does seem like a pivot. And people haven't had a ton of time to wrap their heads around it. I mean, there is definitely there is polling to suggest that there is public frustration with the current way the park board is operated. Now, how much of that could be changed by removing the elected board and having, a different governance structure? I don't know the answer to that, but there is polling. Research Code has done polling over the years that showed sort of a significant chunk of the public believes that the current elected park board arrangement Vancouver has should change. And I had seen polling on this that sort of showed that percentage of people growing over the last couple of years. So the mayor, seems to be tapping into something. There is a level of frustration with the way things currently work in Vancouver. And the fact that the mayor's press release last week, when he announced this big change, the fact that it had a bunch of quotes in there from major community organizations, that's not insignificant. You had youth sports organizations. The chief of the Musqueam First Nation was saying that he would support changing in this direction. You had major cultural organizations like the Visaki parade organizers, the Honda Celebration of Light. So you had all these big organizations, and I'm sure
Mm.
it's not nothing for them to, show up and speak to a change like this. So there is some support for changing the governance structure of the park board, But then I'm also hearing from a lot of people who, I kind of wonder, how inside baseball is this? Do people a lot of people
Right.
really, care about these dynamics of the park board? But I am hearing from a lot of readers who are saying, uh, and again, it's not a scientific poll, but I am hearing from a number of people who say, I'm not necessarily for or against the park board. I don't really, but the way that this is unfolding seems
Right.
kind of weird. And just not
That's
an
interesting.
ideal
You,
way to
you
be
would have
running
expected,
things.
yeah, you might have expected it to be something that was perhaps voted on in the next civic election 3 years from now would be.
Well, I mean, yeah, a party could campaign on it, and I think if a party did campaign on it, it it might not be an unpopular policy proposal. Like there is this polling
Right.
that suggests that now, but of course, I mean, yeah, they didn't do that. They campaigned on improving the park board and getting a majority on there and making things run well. And I mean, the park board over the last year has kept very busy. They've been doing a bunch of, as you mentioned, the waterfront stuff, but they've also there's all these revenue generation strategies, and so there's a bunch of stuff that this ABC Majority Park Board has been quite active with. They've been keeping busy and lots of files. And when I asked the mayor what was the specific decision that this park board made, or were there any specific meetings or outcomes or incidents or anything that was influencing his decision, he didn't point to anything specifically. He didn't say there were any particular
Hmm.
outcomes or decisions that had convinced him that this was the right way to go. He said he had just become convinced that the governance structure itself was broken, in his words.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll look forward to your reporting on his motion on Wednesday and maybe some more details on why he's doing this.
Yeah,
All
more
right.
to come. More to
Okay.
come.
Thanks, Dan.
Great. Okay, thank you, Harold.